So Billy Bob, you recently won the Golden Globe for your new show, Goliath. Excuse me. What did that kind of recognition mean for you for this show?
Well, anytime you win an award for a movie or a show, it gives it more visibility. It's a very good thing. And people, the stock answer is, well, we don't do these things for awards, and you're never thinking about an award when you're making it, which is true. But once the ball gets rolling and you do get nominated for an award of some type, then you start thinking about it, because it does help out your show or movie or whatever, and so then you start to, then all of a sudden you want it. You know what I mean? So you weren't thinking about it, but now it's like, oh, okay, I'm nominated for this thing. I sure hope I get it. And it's always an honor to get an award, because I think most actors are still kids inside. You always want approval, acceptance, and I think to say otherwise, I think when people do say otherwise, I think they're probably not telling the truth.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the character that you play in this show.
Well, he's kind of the initial thought was he's a character like Paul Newman's character in The Verdict. He's a lawyer, he's down now, he's not doing so well, but at one point he was kind of on top. And so lawyers by nature are kind of actors, and so to play a lawyer as an actor it's a pretty great thing. It's something we all want to do, because lawyers are there to convince a jury and to investigate things and learn about something and then present your case, which is kind of what actors and lawyers both do. And so this is a guy who has had his ups and downs. So do actors. You go through a period where you're really on top, and then you hit the skids for a while, and then you come back and all that kind of thing. So it was kind of a natural part to play, really. And the character is not, in a lot of ways, not a heck of a lot different than I am.
Well, what were some of the similarities between the two of you, and what did you draw upon for the character?
Well, he's a guy who kind of sees justice, even though he works within a certain system. He still knows that there are certain intangibles that don't necessarily count in the sort of technical world of the law, you know what I mean? And I think it's too simple to say he doesn't go by the book, because he knows he has to go by the book, but he knows that there are ways that you can convince people on a human level also. And I think I feel that way in a lot of ways. They say life's not fair, and it's really not always. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. And it's finding a way to work within the system and yet get your point across and actually try to seek justice and get it. And I feel like that just about every day.
Right. Working with David E. Kelley, what is that experience like?
Well, he and a guy named Jonathan Shapiro, who is a lawyer, they co-wrote it and co-created it and everything, and they had a certain sort of knowledge of the law that was very helpful for us, because when you're doing this stuff, you don't want to just say lines, and there's a lot of legal talk in this thing, and so having those guys, around, Jonathan was on the set all the time, so you want to know not just what you're saying, but why you're saying it and what it means, and so that was really helpful to learn all this stuff. I'd played a lawyer before in a movie called The Judge, but it was more of a big cameo, and we had a great technical advisor on that, and she helped me a you know, after you play a lawyer for a few episodes of something like this, you start to feel like you are one. It's a very easy world to get into, and suddenly you really want to win the case. But yeah, David had such a successful track record. You know, I mean, he's been doing this a long time, and he's more of a, and I am too to a degree, but he's kind of a hermit in a lot of ways. You know, so David isn't there all the time. He writes from where he lives, you know, and sends it into you, and then you look it over from there. And so, you know, we thought we had a pretty good chance because, you know, his shows are usually pretty successful.
I think some 30 different actors have won 38 Emmys for shows that he's created. So as a writer yourself, I mean, what is he doing differently from other people that you think makes it successful?
I don't know, maybe he knows, he just knows what the audience likes, maybe, you know. I don't know if there's ever a real explanation for that stuff, you know. I mean, I see things that are successful sometimes that I'm not crazy about, and yet the audience is, you know, and then there's other things that I love and people don't get them. So I'm not a good barometer for that kind of thing, you know. Like when people ask me, what do you want to write, you know, for myself as a writer. And I write stuff based on Southern literature, and I'm not sure that's relevant anymore, so I don't write much anymore. But yeah, some people just kind of know what the audience likes, and you know, this season I've read a couple of them, and it's really headed in a great direction. So we're pretty excited about it.
You mentioned his desire of winning the case, and much like Paul Newman in The Verdict, it's about so much more than winning the case. It's about winning back his own self-worth, right, his own reputation. Can you talk a bit about that added layer in there?
Yeah, well, the good thing about it is the character is interesting enough, just his life, that you can make a story out of that. So that while there is courtroom stuff, to me that was the least interesting part of it, you know, because it's cool, you know, and I love doing that part, but it's such a complicated character that you could have the story just about the guy and the people around him, you know, and it's still, I think, as powerful, maybe more so in some ways if you stick to that stuff. Yeah, he's just kind of a mess inside, not a real secure guy, you know. He's had a lot of darkness in his past, and so I think this whole idea of the Goliath, you know, David versus Goliath, I think a lot of people feel that, you know, these days especially. I mean, you know, if you're your average worker versus like the corporations, you know, I think we all have it on our minds, you know, and I think that's interesting to people, and you know, certainly interests me. And this guy is trying to do it starting from a pretty low point in his life, you know, so he feels like he's really got an uphill battle. And of course, next season he's made a little money, you know, but I don't think he feels comfortable with that either. It's and that's another similarity, you know, with that character and myself, is that I've never felt much like a part of the world I work in. You know, I'm not much of a Hollywood guy, I guess you'd say. You know, I don't hang out much. You know, I stay home. And so I've always felt a little bit like an outsider, and I think this guy does too, just because of his worldview.
It's interesting you say that, because it kind of relates to something I wanted to ask you about. The night that you won the Academy Award for Sling Blade, we just had Jeffrey Rush in this very room talking about that night as well. And it was so interesting because so many of the people nominated that night were unknowns, you know?
Mhm.
You had done some movies beforehand, like One True Thing, but this was like your big breakthrough. So I'm just curious what the mood in the room was like that night.
Well, not having had much experience with the Academy Awards up till then, it was all a real blur to me. It happens, the build up to it is really huge, but then once you get there, you kind of feel like you're in a cloud, and you don't remember specifics very easily, you know. I remember Billy Crystal was the host, and I remember that Jodie Foster gave me the award. Those two things I remember. My mom was there, and Dwight Yoakam went with me because he was in the movie, and Dwight's my buddy, and he went along. And so I think they let you take 3 or 4 people, and my wife at the time was with me. It was so crazy and quick, and then you're whisked off to do interviews with everybody, and you stay up all night. I remember being on Oprah Winfrey's show in the morning, and she was, you know, somewhere else, I guess Chicago or New York, wherever it was, probably Chicago. And I remember sitting there with Harvey Weinstein on a sofa at the Hyatt Hotel, and because you're just going from one place to the next, and they were doing this sort of, I guess, satellite hookup thing where I was on the show with my award and all that kind of thing, and I was wasted, and I fell asleep. We were in not during the show, I was almost falling asleep, but just before they got there, I was like this, and I was kind of almost sleeping on Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, that was pretty funny, and but it was so thrilling. It really was. I mean, I have to admit it. I loved it. You know, I've been nominated for. Well, as a matter of fact, you mentioned Jeffrey Rush. Jeffrey and I were nominated for Best Actor, and up against each other. And he and I did a couple of interviews together as sort of relative newcomers, even though we'd both been working for years. You know, we were in the public eye. We weren't, either one of us, that big a thing yet. So they had the two of us do some interviews together, and that was fun. And he was a real nice guy.
And I'm sure that to win for a movie that had been a passion project of yours that you wrote and directed and started, and has created an iconic character too.
Right.
I mean, that must have been really significant for you.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. There are certain characters that you do, if you're lucky, along the way that do become iconic, and pretty quickly. And some people have played characters that are iconic maybe later in their life, or in the sort of in your twilight years or something like that, when you think back on them and everything. But the character in Sling Blade became an iconic almost instantly. Like Bad Santa was another one. So then some people say, well, you get sick of hearing about people doing impressions of that or saying things from Bad Santa, and you don't get sick of it, because you ought to be proud of it, that you've actually made a mark that way.
I think the character you played in the first season of Fargo too is becoming like that as well.
I think so. Yeah, Lauren Malvo has very quickly become iconic.
Yeah. You actually you did a voiceover stunt. I think it was last week of Fargo. How did that come about? Was that just repaying a favor? Or?
No, Noah just called me and he said, we've had, I think they've done that a couple of times with characters, that came back to do a voiceover for the next season. And it was this Peter and the Wolf thing. And he said, yes, like when David Bowie did Peter and the Wolf. He said, only just do it as you. I said, well, you want me to be Malvo or me? And he just said, nah, you. He said, they'll know you're Malvo. But it was pretty interesting. I mean, I did it in no time. It was just one scene, setting it up. But it was an interesting little thing. I haven't seen it myself yet, but I'll probably look at it at some point. You know, I'm not one of those who can easily watch or listen to himself. I like to move forward, and there's something about revisiting things you've done before that starts making you think, oh, that was so amazing, I wish it had never ended, or stuff like that. You know, you get kind of nostalgic in a kind of a melancholy way, and I get that way almost instantly, even if I just did it last week.
I'm the same way. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it.